Recording in progress.
We were speaking up till now that there is Oid HaSoiviv Kol Almin, that's what's Meir when Mashiach comes, and there's a level of Memala Kol Almin, that's the Oid HaKav that comes after the Tzimtzum Rishon, that comes down in Gan Eden at present. And even though the Oid HaSoiviv is so much higher and greater than the light of Memala Kol Almin, still in all, to be able to reach there, we need to first go through Gan Eden, Hayoshavet Baganim. First has to be the level of Gan Eden, and then you have to be Barach Lecha, you have to skip, jump, escape, make a great leap to be able to get to the level of Soiviv, of La'asad Lavei Al Horib Samim, on the mountains of spice. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the Maimer. And we explain that this distinction and separation between the Oid HaSoiviv, which is undefined and undivisible, versus the Oid HaMemala, which has definition and has spheres in it and is divided, came about through the Tzimtzum Rishon. The Tzimtzum Rishon separated between the higher level of Shem Havaya and the lower level of Shem Havaya. Higher level of Shem Havaya is the Oid Ein Sof, the lower level of Shem Havaya is the Kav, Memala Kol Almin. And this is also the idea that we say, Shema Yisrael Havaya Lekeinu Havaya Echad, that there's a Lekeinu, that's the level of the Tzimtzum, the Midas Hadin, between the first Havaya in Shema Yisrael, the Havaya of the Oid Ein Sof Shlifnei Tzimtzum, and the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Havaya after the Tzimtzum. We also mentioned that though Elokeinu is part of the name Elokim, which is the level of Tzimtzum and Gvura, but the exact expression of Elokeinu is something that has to do with Tzimtzum, that's Noite Ledin Ulechesed, that this is something that comes down to bring about the revelation. It's not something that's there to be able to conceal just for the sake of concealment, but it allows that eventually, from the Oid HaMemala, we could eventually reach and have the revelation of the Oid HaSoiviv Kol Almin. So now he's going to go a little bit more within the Yid, the idea of Elokeinu and Havaya. What does that mean within the level of a person's avodah to the Eibishter? Ois Vav, top of page Reish Lamed Daled. Mamshech Ba Maimer, the Maimer continues. The Maimer that he's based on, the Maimer the Rebbe Rashab, according to what's explained in a different place, the Elokeinu, the word Elokeinu, Elika Shalanu, that's the simple meaning of Elokeinu, our Elika, who Shem Havaya Shebechol Echad V'Echad Yisrael. What does it mean, ours? It means the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's to be found in every single Yid. Just like in the whole Seder Ishtalshlus of Shem Havaya, so too within each and every one of us is Shem Havaya. That's why we say Chelik Havaya Amay. That Havaya is, a part of Havaya is his nation, meaning that Havaya comes into each and every one of us. So now, this idea that Elokeinu is the Shem Havaya that's within each and every one, moving the Oid Yosef Elokeinu Mechaber Beis Hashemis. This makes it even more understood how Elokeinu is the means of joining and coming from the Havaya of above to the Havaya of below. How is that so? Through the Avodah of Yid, in the four letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei of the Nefesh, Nasa Chibur the Beis Hashem. So we make in the big Havaya, in the Havaya of the worlds, we make the joining of the two Shemus Havaya, Sheba Havaya de Lasata, that in the lower name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, Meir Hagilu da Havaya de Leila, shines the revelation of Havaya above. In the Kav, it shines the level of the Oid Ein Sof. In Memala, it shines the level of Soiviv. So we need to first understand what is this Havaya within the person, that what's the avoid of the Havaya in every person. In the Fire Sham, and over there he explains the Inyan HaYud, the Shem Havaya Sheben Nefesh, one Nochas Atzmusi. The Yud that's in a person's avodah is the Havai of the person's nefesh, that's putting himself aside. Yud means Tzimtzum, Nekuda, point. He doesn't expand. He's just a dot. As a lake tzchavek legamri tell the kuz ve'ein mischash v'mesichlo. He totally sets himself aside for godliness, and he doesn't take in consideration his own mind, his own intellect. The loizable vat, not only the gam k'shas seichel shloi machayev b'ifenach and mischash v'mzeh. Not only when his own mind concludes something the opposite of godliness, so then he doesn't give it any consideration. Including also the fact that he doesn't take in consideration the fact that they're going to say about him that the way he acts is the opposite of intellect. In other words, if a person says to him, "What are you doing this for? It's irrational." So he says, "I don't care what you say that's irrational." That is the Yud of Shem Havai of the Nefesh, in its most basic level, but there's even higher than that. Al Yiseirim is even more so. The fact that he puts himself aside for godliness, it's not just because his mind and his intellect obligates him to do this, like it's explained in a different place that the intellect itself obligates him that there are things that are beyond intellect. In other words, not obligates in the sense of means it forces him to say that there are things that are beyond intellect. So the fact that he comes to the conclusion that there's something beyond intellect still means that some of his ego is involved over here, because his intellect understands that there are things that transcend intellect, and therefore he's willing to put himself aside. That's not the ultimate yud in the person's service. Rather, without any sort of calculation, even the type of calculation that says that intellect realizes that there's things that transcend intellect, not even that. He just completely devotes himself and sets all of his mind and thoughts aside just for godliness. That is the yud in the nefesh ha'adam. Further, the hey, the inyan hay rishoyna, the first letter hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, it's the meditation and thinking into the fact and understanding how all the revelations in the world, even the revelation of the transcendent light of all the worlds, how much more so the revelation that fills the world. It's only a ray of Hashem. It's not Hashem's very being in essence. That came down through multiple levels of constrictions and limitations. When a person realizes that even Soiv Kalam, and much more so Mamal Kalam, is not Hashem's essence, he becomes very uncomfortable. He feels very confined, very constricted. As Vertim Zeir Eng, he becomes very uncomfortable. This is especially so, this discomfort is fed by the fact when he doesn't just think about the worlds the way they were created, that they're very far from Hashem, but he knows about himself how distant his own private situation, how distant he is from godliness. And how did he get there? It's connected with the previous meditation. Because the reason why he finds himself in such a state, where he individually is very far from godliness, is because the light and the revelation that shines in the general world is only a constricted and limited ray of Hashem. Therefore, the lower and the further it descends, this ray of Hashem, He misamtzemes yoser, it constricts even more. It becomes even more mitzumtzum. Therefore, that's the cause why he personally came to this level, because the worlds are constantly coming less and less, and the revelation of godliness is less and less. In other words, practically speaking, we're living in a world that godliness is concealed. Because we are living in a world that godliness is concealed, through no action of our own, it's just the way the world is. So therefore, our own personal situation is also that we're very far from godliness. And when a person thinks into it on a more personal level, how far he is from godliness, from this he becomes even more constrained and uncomfortable. He becomes so uncomfortable. The expression in Yiddish is he can't find himself a place. He can't handle it. He can't deal with it. We could say, this idea that the person should be completely distraught and upset and uncomfortable from the fact that he's so far from Hashem, this should really resonate with him. How does he really reach such? How does this idea that a person becomes so upset, so uncomfortable, that he literally cannot find himself a place because he does not, he feels how far he is from godliness. So how does a person reach such a type of perception, such type of feeling? How does it resonate with him, such a type of thing? So there initially has to be the bittul of setting himself aside. In other words, before we can have the meditation and how. So to be able to reach the letter of Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, to be able to have this type of understanding and appreciation that that makes him so upset that because of that he is not able to find any space for himself, that he's so upset at the fact that he's so far from Hashem. This must be predicated on the Yud of Yud Kei Vav Kei. When he first has the Yud of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that he completely puts himself aside, so then his intellect is now in a place that he can reach such an appreciation. Let's see it inside. The Mekivon Shah Seichel Umetzias, since intellect is an existence, a separate entity, it's not about bittul by its very nature. From the perspective of intellect itself, it's impossible that this should be something that truly becomes accepted by him and should resonate with him to such a degree that the person should be uncomfortable from it. How the entire existence of the whole chain order of descent of the world is far. Because since intellect is based on existence and ego, the self of the intellect does not truly allow him that he should to resonate with him this type of feeling. Therefore, initially it has to be the bittul of setting himself aside, that's beyond intellect, inyan hayud, which is the level of the letter yud, nekuda b'lvad, like we said before, it's only the level of a point. He has no other existence. Then, once we have this underlying foundation, once we have this first type of approach of complete nullification, so then even the intellect and even the meditation now follow the given of the nekuda, which in Kabbalah it's called nekuda behechala. There is a point and the dot in the chamber. Nekuda is going on Chachma. The Heichal, the chamber, which is a large place, that's going on Bina. It's important for the Bina to be able to have the true idea of what Bina is meant to be only when the Chachma is housed in the Bina. If the Bina, let's say, becomes separated from the Chachma, so sometimes Bina can, by its very nature, start going off on tangents and unrelated to the topic and so on. It needs to be guided by the Nekuda of the Chachma. That's the simple sense of Nekuda Beichola. Here in Avodah, he's talking about Nekuda Beichola, that for the Bina to lead him to such a state where he's totally uncomfortable with the distance that he has from the Eibishter, it's only when it's based on the premise of the Yud that preceded his Bina, that preceded his intellect, the complete Hanochas Atzmus. That's the Yud Kei Shebenefesh and the avoid of a nefesh of a person. The Inyan Avav the Shem Havai Shebenefesh who Inyan Eiska Torah, on the letter Vav of Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei the soul, that is the involvement of Torah. As we know, it's brought down in Tanya, in the Ger Satshuva, that Vav Kei goes on Torah and mitzvahs. After the meditation, which is the avoid of the first letter Hey of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that the general revelations in the world is only a constricted and a contracted ray of Hashem. Top of page Reish Lamed Hey. From this, the person becomes very uncomfortable. It says about the Yidden of Mitzrayim, they cried out to Hashem in their discomfort. The person that feels his distance from Hashem cries out and davens to Hashem. There should be the revelation of Hashem's very essence that's beyond the constriction. This brings him to being involved in Torah. Through being involved in Torah, he now quenches his upset, he quenches his thirst, and through that it shines to him the revelation of Hashem's very essence. This is a classic idea that Chassidus says, that by davening, we're supposed to awaken a love for Hashem. After davening, we're supposed to follow this immediately with Torah study. How come? Because since Torah embodies Hashem Himself encloses Himself in Torah, and when we study Torah, our mind, therefore our entire being becomes completely united with Hashem. So after the thirst that we feel by davening for Hashem, we therefore quench that thirst through Torah study. The same thing over here. When a person comes to the conclusion about how far he is from Hashem, he cries out to Hashem, and it bothers him to no end. So then he follows that up with Torah study. So now I want Hashem close to me. How do I bring Hashem close to me? With Torah study. That's also one of the ideas of the Vav. The Vav shows an Amshacham Lamata, drawing down from above to below. That's Hashem coming down to him and becoming part of him, instead of as being in the distance from Hashem. Hashem is now uniting with him. And then he goes on and says in the third line from the top of page Reish Lamed Hey, Dagam She'eraisa Mechachma Nafkis. Though Torah comes out of Chachma, so therefore one could say that he's only getting Chachma, and Chachma is only a ray again. You're still at a distance. What did we say before? The Hey, meditating, how even Soiv Kalam, for sure Malak Kalam is far away from Hashem, but the Torah is only coming from Chachma. So what does that help? What's making him upset? So that the Rebbe continues, how do you do it? It's known, the examination of the Alter Rebbe, whose yard sites are Chav Dal Tevis, that he explains that the expression from this expression itself, Torah comes out of Chachma. Nafkis dafkis. Specifically, it says it comes out from Chachma. Not that it comes from Chachma, not that the Torah's level is Chachma, but the word comes out. moving, it's understood, Shoylish HaTorah Hu HaRatzon HaElyon V'chulum Shalamayla Ma'Chachma. It's understood that the root of Torah is the will of above, that's beyond the level of Chachma. It only afterwards becomes enclosed in Chachma, and from there it comes out in the way of revelation. That's the idea of nafkes. It comes out. It's revealed from Chachma. But really, it has a much higher source. And because of that much higher source, it quenches our thirst for Hashem. It relieves us of that discomfort that we feel distant from Hashem because we become joined with Hashem Himself. So that's the Vav of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. The Inyan Hei Achroina B'Shem Havai Shem B'Nefesh U'Maisa Mitzvahs, and the final Hei of Shem Yud-Kei Vav-Kei in the soul is the actions of mitzvahs. Shezad Ba La'achrei Avodah the Vav the Torah. That follows the Avodah of the Vav of Torah. In a very practical sense, it follows the Vav of Torah. Because to be able to fulfill the mitzvahs the way it's supposed to be, a person needs to know the action that he has to do. So that's the idea of the final Hey of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. It also has to do with action, because or mitzvahs in general, because the Hey has to do, the three lines of the Hey is Machshava Dibra Maisa, which is with what we fulfill the mitzvahs. So this is what we went through, the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei in a person, that this Yud-Kei Vav-Kei in a person helps to bridge the gap between the Havaya L'Elon and Havaya L'Sata, that the Havaya of Eirus of Shlifnei Tzimtzum should come down in the Havaya, in the Kav, in the Malkalam that's after the Tzimtzum. Okay, let's continue in Oizayin. V'hinei Avsha Avodah the Maisa Mitzvahs. Hihei Achroina Shalomata Meiskat Torah Shehu Avav. Though the Avodah of the actions of the mitzvahs is the final Hey, and the final Hey is lower than the involvement of Torah, that's the Vav. Literally, Yud is the highest level, the first Hey is the next, the Vav is next, and the Hey Achroina, the final Hey, is the lowest level. So the actions of the mitzvahs are the lowest. The very fact that it's the final Hey of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, from that itself it's understood. There's still an advantage and a quality in mitzvahs over Torah. It's explained at length in the previously quoted Maimer of the Rebbe Rashab. The Torah, though its root is in the supernal will and the will of Hashem that's beyond Chachma, like we said before, that it's just Chachma Nafkis, it only comes out of Chachma, but really its source is higher. The will of the Torah, after all, was enclosed in Chachma. Now the very fact, just like we said before, that the fact that the oil comes enclosed in the vessels, that means that the oil itself now is, even before it comes into the vessels, that shows that it's liable to division and separation and so on, and definition. The same thing, when the rotzen of can become enclosed in Torah, the mezem mucher, from this we are forced to say it's obvious that this will of Hashem that's enclosed in Chachma, gam lefnei islapshusa b'Chachma, even prior to becoming enclosed in Chachma, it's a will that is a complex will. It's made up of other parts, meaning there's a pure will that has no intellect mixed into it, and then there's a will that has intellect mixed into it. Pure will is the essential will that's undefined. So the very fact that the Ratzon of Torah is able to become enclosed in Chachma of Torah, that itself means that the Ratzon, the will of Hashem, even prior to coming down into the Chachma of Torah, is still murkav. It's still not a pure, unadulterated will. It still is like made up of parts. As opposed to the will that Hashem has in mitzvahs, is a ratzon that's not complex. It's not made up of different parts. Sharotzen the mitzvahs ubasiyah b'poil dafke. The will of mitzvahs is an actual action. Ki asiyah b'poil begashmias eina be'erech klal. Because the physical, actual action is incomparable to the level of will. They are too far from each other to say that will has in it murka of the idea of action. Therefore, it's impossible to say that the will of Hashem is enclosed in the action. Enclothing means that it's in something that's comparable to it, meaning that the will becomes affected by it. Obviously, we are doing Hashem's will, we have Hashem's will, we're doing a mitzvah. Therefore, the will that exists and that is in the action, it's a will that's not enclosed and not a complex will that's mixed with anything else. It's a pure will of Hashem. So that's why mitzvahs are greater, even though it's the final letter of the Hey of Yudke Vavke, the very fact that it's so low is connected with a much higher level. Through the actions of mitzvahs is increased on a level also in the understanding and comprehension and grasp of Torah. The very action of mitzvahs adds to Torah. Like we said, Talmud Gadol Shemevil de Maisa we learned not too long ago, that the greatness of Torah study, when does it reach its true elevation? Through action. Like it says, the goodness of your reason and knowledge, teach me, because I believed in your mitzvahs. What's the connection? Belief in mitzvahs. Why does that have to do with the geshmak learning? Through the fulfillment of mitzvahs that he says over there, this is especially so when the fulfillment of mitzvahs is not a result of the person's reason and intention and understanding and comprehension, all these great levels that he appreciates in Torah mitzvahs. Rather, he's doing it just an action. He's doing it out of pure faith. Through this we reach the goodness of the reason and understanding and the knowledge of Torah. This is what we reach when a person does mitzvahs in b'chlal, and when a person does mitzvahs in such a way of a complete bittul that he taps into Hashem's will. Because he taps into Hashem's will, so now the Torah that he learned, that helps him do the mitzvahs, are becoming elevated as well. Similar to what we learned before, the malachim. That the malachim become elevated. I don't know, maybe we learned, I'm not sure. That the malachim become, we learned about this. The malachim become elevated through the avodah of a yid, thinking about the meditation about the malachim. That inspires him, so now that elevates the malachim as well, because they caused him to get to that isbonus. The same thing, the Torah and the understanding of Torah, which led him to mitzvahs, are now elevated by this great level of mitzvahs that he's fulfilling, especially when he does it in a way of emunah.